1 year ago, as a high handicap beginner golfer, I swapped out my set of £1,200 Titleist T350s for these, the Takomo 101 irons, which cost less than £500. 12 months on, how do I feel about that decision and what do I think of the clubs themselves? And crucially, have they helped me drop my handicap in that time? Watch on to find out and for my full 1 year review of the Takomo 101s. So when I first started golfing just under 2 years ago now, like a lot of people, I moved into some loaner clubs to get myself going that were just borrowed off a friend, some old ping irons. They were sort of 15 years old, but they were absolutely fine just while I was getting used to the game and more importantly, seeing if I wanted to continue. However, after a couple of months, I decided that I did want to continue and I kind of gotten pretty quickly obsessed. So I went for a fitting for some irons of my own. And what I ended up with was a set of Titleist T350s, which at the time were the #1 game improvement iron for high handicappers, which is something that I very much was. And they'd only been out kind of 2 or 3 months. So I went for a fitting, which was a pretty good experience. First time I'd done anything like that, found it very, very fun. And I ended up with a full set of the T350s from 4-iron through to pitching wedge. Unfortunately, it wasn't long before I ran into a fairly significant issue with the T350s, or at least the set that I'd been sold. After only a couple of weeks of use on the range, the back panel fell off my 4-iron. Now these are a hollow-headed iron, so they're a forged face, but they just have a plastic back panel, which has kind of the Titleist logo and things like that. And this just popped off during a range session one day. Hadn't done anything weird with it, I hadn't thrown it or smashed it, but the plate just popped off the back and kind of exposed the cavity at the back of the iron head. Now, full credit to Titleist and the shop that I bought the irons from. They handled the return seamlessly. They sent me not just a new 4-iron, but actually a full new set of T350s, a range collection of my existing set. And so within probably a week, maybe 10 days, I had once again a full functioning set of T350s and could go out and start playing again. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of the story with the T350s, as a couple of months later, the same thing happened with my 9-iron. This time I was out on the course and didn't even realize it had fallen off until after the round, but I looked down at my bag and I saw that once again, a panel had popped off one of my clubs. The back of the iron had been exposed. I did reach out to the shop, who reached out to Titleist, and again, they did do a pretty good returns process. Slightly more of a faff this time around. I don't know if they thought I was running some sort of iron racket and trying to just get 3 sets of clubs, but again, within a couple of weeks, I actually had to take the clubs in this time, got sent a new set and had once again a full set of T350s. However, I was slightly soured at this point. I spent obviously a lot of money on these lovely new irons, and twice I'd had issues with them, with the backplate popping off, and I kind of thought at that point maybe I wanted to swap out into something else. This is when I stumbled across Takomo and ultimately ended up in the set of the Takomo 101s. At this point in time, it's impossible to move online without seeing Takomo everywhere. Tons of the big YouTube golf influencers use them, the Bryan brothers, we've got Grant Horvat now, an owner of the company, etc, etc. But back when I bought my clubs a year ago, it wasn't quite the same landscape. The first thing I thought was that the irons were absolutely beautiful, and obviously still maintain that today. But also the idea that you could get a full set of good performing, forgiving irons as a sort of beginner golfer for such a cheap price was kind of amazing to me. And because I'd been having the issues with the Titleist, I thought maybe I could swap it out and save myself a little bit of money in the process. So what I decided to do was to sell my T350s. I put them on eBay. I paid about £1,200 for them, and obviously they were used, but I still managed to get something like £850 for them, which I thought was pretty good. And I used that money to buy a full set of the Takomo 101s, which I'm still using today. Now the price of these has gone up very slightly over the year since I bought mine, but at the time they were £450 for a full set of irons, 4 through pitching wedge. That's basically 40% of what I'd paid for my T350s new, and you know, not much less than 60% of what I got from them second hand. So I was able to play the T350s for a few months, sell them, buy a brand new set of 101s, and still have made a decent amount of money doing so. And since then I have used the Takomo 101s for a full year, and I wanted to give a kind of roundup of what I thought, what I make of the irons, would I recommend them, generally my experiences and my reviews using the 101s. The big headline is that I absolutely love these clubs, but don't click off the video just yet because I will go into a little bit more detail about why, and what I think of them and what my experience has been like. The most important thing is obviously the performance, and frankly I found almost no difference between these and the significantly more expensive set of T350s. Now the 101s are designed for the higher handicap golfer. On their website, Takomo says they are for anything from a brand new beginner player to a kind of 15 handicap or so, and that was definitely who I was when I first got them. My handicap at the time of purchasing these was 19, so performance is obviously, you know, primary consideration for anyone buying any kind of irons, but particularly a new golfer who's just looking to get better and needs a good amount of forgiveness. Like most irons, they feel great when you hit them off the center of the club, but they also don't feel that bad when you hit them off the heel or the toe or catch one a bit thin. And more importantly, the performance doesn't differ wildly like you might get with something like a blade. Obviously you'll get something of a distance drop off if you're not hitting out of the center, but generally these are pretty tolerant of bad strikes. And again, against the T350, I didn't notice anything meaningful in terms of them losing distance or losing accuracy when I wasn't hitting them perfectly. The one thing I would say, the one difference I did find versus the T350s was that these don't have the tendency to have a kind of really hot shot out of the middle of nowhere that goes kind of 10-15 yards longer. That is something that I did notice with the T350s. Occasionally, for no reason that I could ascertain, the ball would just fly a green or just go 10-15 yards longer than I expected. They were kind of a very hot iron, like a lot of game improvement irons are. These have good distance, they're fairly strong lofted, they do go quite a long way, but I certainly didn't notice those extra hot ones coming off out of the middle of nowhere and kind of going longer than my target. So that has been good. So overall, I would say the performance of these, every bit as good as clubs that cost 3 times as much, and no complaints from me as a kind of beginner high handicap golfer. So I mentioned this already, but one of the things that attracted me to the Takomo irons in the first place is the looks. Now, it's hard to deny that these, and in fact all of the Takomo irons, just look brilliant. They're such a sleek, minimalist design, which is something that really appeals to me. They're not plastered in logos or screws or plates or anything like that. They're just a really sleek, clean, beautiful looking iron, and I think it's incredible to get something which is a hollow head, forgiving, essentially game improvement iron that still looks this good. Since I've had these in the bag, I've had a lot of nice comments about them, a lot of admiring glances and people thinking that they might in fact be blades, and sort of giving me quizzical looks to ask why a player of my fairly middling standard of golf would be playing blades, but of course they're not. These are a beginner's game improvement iron, but they're just in a really, really sleek appearance, and that is something that I definitely do appreciate. Now, obviously, whether an iron performs well, whether an iron is good, is more important than how they look. But I do think there's something to be said for having clubs in your bag which you just really enjoy hitting. It's nice to be able to look down in your bag every time you go out for a round of golf and be happy with your set of clubs, to enjoy pulling them out of the bag, to enjoy hitting them. And while it may be just a placebo effect, I think there probably is something in the fact that if you like your clubs, you're going to hit them more, maybe practice more, maybe play more, and then ultimately hopefully play better. So massive tick in the looks department for the Takomos. And I just really enjoy seeing them in my bag, really enjoy taking them out and hitting them, and that hasn't worn off a year on. So as I said, the performance of these things has been great. I've certainly noticed no difference in terms of their ability to hold greens, no difference really in the trajectory or spin rate or distances versus the T350s. But there are 2 areas where I think they might be slightly weaker than their competitors, even if it is only very fractionally. The first is durability. Now, I've had these irons for 12 months now, and to be fair, in that time I have played quite a lot of golf, but even so, they have started to wear on the face fairly significantly. Certainly the clubs that I tend to hit more in practice, like my 8 iron in particular, is showing a good amount of wear on the face. It is kind of tarnishing and wearing quite a lot around the sweet spot, and yes, around certain other areas of the club face as well. But that is something which I don't have a great deal of comparison for. These are obviously the first set of irons that I've owned for any meaningful length of time. But when I have looked at playing partners' irons, and even some that they've had for longer than I've been playing these for, I don't notice quite so much wear and tear on them as I've seen with these in the first 12 months. Very quick update here because I wanted to make sure I wasn't just imagining this. I had a look at one of my friend's sets of irons and compared it to my Takomo 101s. On the left, you can see the 9 iron from his set of Mizuno irons, which he's had for 8 years. And on the right, you can see my 8 iron from the 101s. So you can definitely see that the Takomo 101s have tarnished much more quickly in that time than his set of Mizunos. Obviously, I don't know exactly how many rounds of golf he's played in that time, but over 8 years, it will definitely be more than I have played in 12 months. I haven't noticed any performance drop-off or issues with the clubs yet, but it is just interesting to note that they do seem to wear slightly more quicker than some other sets of irons potentially. And the only other area where I'd say perhaps the T350s were superior was feel. Now, these do feel great, don't get me wrong, and if you hit them out of the sweet spot, they feel fantastic. As I said before, they don't feel truly terrible and sort of bone trembling if you catch them a little bit thin. But they just aren't quite as buttery soft as the T350s were. Now, the difference there is that these aren't a forged irons, whereas the T350s were. And with those forged irons, you're typically going to get that slightly softer, slightly smoother feel when you hit them well. It's not a complaint against these, you know, they're not forged, and that is partially reflected in the price. And certainly some of the Takomo irons, like the 201s, are forged and so will feel that little bit softer. But it's just a worthwhile point of comparison when looking at what these are like against what I used to have. They feel fantastic and I have no complaints. They just don't feel quite as wonderfully fantastic as the T350s did when hitting them really, really well. Ultimately, my experience with the Takomo 101s has been incredibly positive, and I absolutely recommend them, and I do not regret making the switch. The fact that I was able to save so much money going from a kind of big name premium iron to these and notice no difference in performance is pretty incredible. I think for anyone starting out who wants their own set of irons, they are kind of the perfect place to go. They're good, they're forgiving, they look beautiful, and ultimately you don't have to spend a ton of money to get a great performing set of irons. Even now you can buy a full set of 101s 4-through pitching wedge for less than £500, which is an absolutely incredible bargain. And certainly, although you can't get fitted for them, which is again another potential slight downside, if you are just starting out as a higher handicap golfer, I don't think there's anything you can do better. If you're going to go out and buy something brand new, then get yourself a set of Takomo 101s. For my side, I'm going to stick with them for a bit longer. There is a chance that I will get a new fitting at some point in the next year or two when my handicap comes down further. But for now, I'm going to stick with them and keep playing, and they have seen me through a good amount of improvement. The big question is, has my handicap dropped using the Takomo 101s? And the answer is absolutely yes. I was a 19 when I first bought them, and as of recording this video, I am a 14.2, so 5 strokes knocked off my handicap in the 12 months of using the 101s. Now, of course, are they the primary reason that handicap has dropped? No, I've been playing a lot, I've been practicing a lot, and I'm sure that using the T350s or another decent set of irons, I'd have been able to make just as much progress. But I think it's notable to see that you don't have to spend a huge amount of money to get good irons that can help you as a beginner golfer go from a very high handicap to more of that mid-handicap range. And so for anyone looking to do that, I would say check out the Takomo 101s. If you like the way they look and you want something that can perform well and feel good, then they would get a big thumbs up from me. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you found it useful, and if you did, I would love it if you consider liking and subscribing to the channel. And if you have your own experience with the Takomo 101s or indeed any other irons as a higher handicap or beginner golfers, then do let me know in the comments below, and I will see you in the next one.